Hi, this is Kathy Crane from Kindergarten Kiosk, and welcome to my presentation on teaching young children how to read systematically. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to give you some information that you can take right back into your classroom and get started right away. I will also be posting a lot of follow-up on my blog that you will be able to get some freebies and watch some videos that I refer to in this presentation. I have taught kindergarten for 25 years, preschool for 5 years prior to that, and currently I teach as a K-5 reading specialist. And I have learned a lot about reading, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of that information with you. My husband and we just built a new home. It's the first home that we've built together, and we found that it was a great, complicated, laborious project. And every step of the way, I really couldn't help but compare building a home to teaching a young child to read. Did you know that if the soil isn't prepared correctly, your home will have all sorts of problems, among the worst foundation failure? I didn't know that, but in my neighborhood where all of the homes are new construct, I am watching tractors work for hours and hours and even days working the soil and compacting it to just the right level and density so that a home will stand strong and tall. And if you don't do this, then your home will be able to, or your home will be subject to a lot of failure of foundation and plumbing and windows and doors not working correctly, and it will be put into jeopardy. Young readers are just as volatile, and it's as important that we prepare young children to become readers as soil to build a home. Preferably from birth to age 5, children should have up to 1,000 hours of interaction with a parent or caregiver and do lots of meaningful language activities like singing and rhyming and chanting and print concepts and listening, of course, to stories being read. But the truth is, this does not happen for all children. So it is up to early childhood educators to prep that soil and make sure that our children are ready for reading and they have these crucial language building opportunities. The 30 million word gap is real. When a young child enters kindergarten, the vocabulary discrepancy is daunting. There is between 30 million words difference between children of the wealthiest and the poorest families. And many of the families that also have problems with language discrepancy are just families that are busy, families that are trying to work several jobs and to pay bills. And so they just are not having the time to talk with children as they did in the past. So it is up to us as teachers to fill the gap. We need to make our classroom language rich. Early in my career, I went to a workshop that the instructor told us that if we didn't have songs and poems and environmental print all over our classroom, that we were failing our children. And I took that to heart, and I went back and I started to, every time we read a poem, I would post the poem and let the children interact with it. And I really found a great difference that children really do need to see the written word to the songs that we're singing and the finger plays that we're doing. And it's important that we use gestures and facial expressions when we're teaching songs and stories and finger plays, and that we define all words. There was a time that I decided to ask my students at the end of a story what the word beware meant. I'd read this story for 15 years, and I found that when I asked my students who knew what the word beware meant, that not one student knew the meaning of that vocabulary word. And certainly I thought this has to be just a fluke. And so afternoon session rolled around and I asked the same question, and still not one child knew the word beware. So from that time on, I knew it was really important that I don't take anything for granted, and I assume that all children need vocabulary defined when we are using the vocabulary content in everything we do, in the academic content we deliver, in the stories we read, the songs we sing, and the finger plays we do. Another thing is really important is that we talk with our students. We just have conversations. A lot of students have not had the chance to do a lot of back and forth conversations in their life experience. And so it's important that we model how to have conversations with our students. And it's also important to give students time to have conversations one with another. Vygotsky, the great childhood philosopher, he talked about how young children need to talk and talk and talk, and that is how they learn to read, to learn. And so it's important that we let our students talk, and that's why not having a quiet classroom necessarily isn't the right thing to do. We need to have our students talking with one another. Another thing is we need to make our learning play based and have lots of games that are varied and rich with content. I've found that weaving content between academics in a thematic way, it has just the threads that connect learning together. So if my theme is apples, I try to have everything about apples. I try to have my math lessons with apples, and my reading lessons with apples, and my science content and my social studies content, everything with apples, so that all of my vocabulary and word delivery, songs, everything mixed together. And this is a great way to teach young children. Here's a way to fill your classroom with songs, finger plays, and poetry. This Thanksgiving cheer, I simply created this on a Word document, and then I printed it, I saved it, sorry, as a JPEG, and then I took it to Sam's Club. And at Sam's Club, I had them print this digital JPEG into a poster size poster. Then, when I get back to my classroom, I use a clothes hanger, a wire hanger, and tape it to the back of the posters so that just the hook shows. And that way, the posters easily hang on a pocket chart or a coat rack of sorts that you can hang song posters on, that the students can easily grab and use and sing. If you're a homeschool mom, you can do the same thing. You can hang song posters around your teaching area, or you can hang it in your child's bedroom. This what this October Songs and Finger Play is an example of some of the songs that I use. Unfortunately, this is a video, and I have not figured out how to make a video play on this format. So I will be putting all videos on the blog post, as I mentioned before. I like to take those songs that we're singing and the posters we're hanging and using in read the room activities and make poetry books. Here's a poetry book that I bought, just a blank book from Lakeshore. They're really inexpensive and high quality. And so I just take the poem and tape it. I use the like just a tape gun, and tape it onto the book, the tape gun. That tape never will come off, so that's really firm in the book. And then we sing the song together while we point and read, and then the child illustrates their story. So this one is The Spider, and it's sung to the tune of Incy Bincy Spider. The creepy crawly spider went up the water spout, followed by a bat and a big black cat. Out came a ghost and scared them all away, and the creepy crawly spider went somewhere else to play. Kids love that song. And I found that they really love when you take a familiar song, and we call it take the words out and put new words in. They love doing that, and it's an easy way to make songs together. Here are some pictures of my students reading the room and taking advantage of songs that we have around the room. Some of them are in pocket chart form. Some are on posters. Some are printed posters. Some are homemade posters. And some of them are even student-made posters. Another thing that you want to litter in your classroom are student name charts. If you make them so that kids can take the names out and take them over to copy to write and put them back in the pocket chart, kids love it, and they soon begin to really become familiar with each other's names. And you can see that these boys and the girl, what they're playing is they're doing our morning chart where we take the student of the day. So they're taking that name and putting it in, and they'll say it, spell it, clap it, and cheer it, rhyme it, and then fix it. And I have the kids, sorry, Lindsay, that was for you, kids' name, and it cut apart in puzzles. They'll find that name and then they'll spell it correctly. Building the foundation is really the next step after you have the soil all prepped. And did you know that if the foundation isn't the perfect distance from the ground, your house will rust and corrode? I had no idea that foundations have to be a specific size. And did you know if they don't use the strongest of materials and the correct materials, that your home will be vulnerable to total collapse? So everything is just important in the foundation. We were building a casita and they had to actually come and redo the foundation because after they'd poured the foundation, we had a big rainstorm and it had rained on it before. Now, to me, the foundation looked fine after the rain dried up. I thought it was fine, and the contractor came and said, no, that has to be jackhammered up because if the foundation is not strong enough, your home will not stand. So the foundations of reading is just as volatile. Reading is a very complex brain activity. Children do not learn to read automatically. Sure, there's some kids that pick up a book and it just seems like voila, they learned how to read. But for most children, reading needs to be taught sequentially. The materials need to be highly effective, high quality, and purposeful. Scarborough in 2001, he exemplified the reading process by his demonstration of a rope. And a rope being a very sturdy activity, if you untangle the rope and take it apart piece by piece, you will soon see that the rope is put together with tiny strands of twine. And reading is just a great example. This is a great example of reading because all of these skills that are listed are very important. Language comprehension, background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language, verbal skills, literacy, and so forth. So all of those skills, we need to make sure that we are teaching our children. These strands include background knowledge, and with that comes prior knowledge, building connection, gluing new information to old information, seeking for patterns and meaning, unlocking meaning. And then there's vocabulary, the definitions and clarification and the connections that need to be made with communicative words. And then there's academic vocabulary, a strange new vocabulary that children encounter. And language structure. How do words create meaning? What are some features of text, like captions, pictures, labels, table of contents, headings, subheadings, all of those visuals that students will encounter as they learn to read. Then we have word recognition. What is a word anyway? Or phonological awareness, listening to sounds, rhyming, comparing words and sounds, words in a sentence, syllables, onset rhyme, isolating sounds, blending, segmenting, phoneme segmentation and manipulation and deletion. And then phonics, which is the visual. Phonological awareness is auditory parts of learning to read. Phonics is seeing it, alphabet fluency, naming letter sounds, short vowels, blending words, and all of the complex phonics rules that follow. Then there's sight words. Make sure that you have a strategic list and word walls and teach to automaticity. It's a really complex system. Then there's comprehension and fluency and written expression and all of the components that we find under each one of these. So the rope is a great visual because if you really do take apart one of those great big ropes, you will see that each of the strands have many tiny strands that make a small strand. And so that is how reading is. It is so complex. And board by board, we need to build a home. As each board is laid and a nail is set, the house becomes stronger. And it's just the same as we take each strand of the reading process and put it together for a reader. So if you take a look at this visual or visualize in your mind what a home looks like that is a framed structure, you will see that there are numerous boards and thousands of boards that are nailed together to hold the structure together. There's dozens upon dozens of nails. And all of that is important because each one of those gives strength to the structure. Now, if you forget to put in a few of those boards, then your home is going to encounter some problems. And it's the same with teaching kids to read. If you skip some of the components of the learning to read process, then students will have problems later. It might not um, exemplify itself when you are the teacher of the student. They might leave your class at the top of the class at the end of kindergarten. But I've encountered some students that are at the top of the class in kindergarten and are at the bottom of their class in third grade. Now, what went wrong with these students or for these students? Well, most likely it is some of the boards are missing from the foundation of their home. So it's really important that we know the progression of reading, how to teach reading. We won't build a home willy-nilly, and we can't teach a child how to read willy-nilly. We have to know the progression of reading instruction and follow that progression and make sure that none of those components are missed. A great way to make sure that nothing is missed in your reading instruction is using ESGI. I have put all of these components into ESGI as assessments, and so I can easily see if students are missing and have not yet mastered some of the skills. Excuse me. The top line is phonological awareness. And so if you move across the timeline, and this timeline will also be available for you to download on my blog post. If you move across, you'll see that the very first thing students need to do or young children need to do is identify the number of words in a sentence. The cat ran fast. Well, how many words are that? The cat ran fast. 4. You know, you'll be surprised when you're working with young children how hard that is to do, how hard it is to identify words because they hear, they communicate in whole thoughts. And so when someone talks to them, they hear the whole thought. So it's really important that we break it up and have a lot of practice with just counting the words in a sentence. Another skill that's really important at the onset of reading instruction is identifying which sound is different. It really cues students into listening and hearing and prepares their ear for alphabet letter sounds and all of the complexities of phonics that they will encounter later. So a great way to do this activity, and children love, is to record a string of sounds. So generally 3 or 4. If you want to get really challenging, maybe 5. And you would, for students who are struggling, 2 sounds would be where you would begin. And I just record a sound of a toilet flush, a car honk, a door shut. And so I'll play those sounds and say, okay, what are those sounds? And hold up my 3 fingers, 1 finger at a time. Toilet, car horn, door. And this is really also quite surprising to find out students that aren't able to quickly identify those sounds. The next thing that you would do is hearing, mimicking, parroting sounds in sequence. A great game is Simon that prepares students for this. And you know, the game where you push the buttons and then you have to copy the sounds. Well, it's kind of that same idea. And with students that are struggling to sounds, and it's just boo ba, and then you point at them, your turn, and they'll say boo ba and wajai, wajai, and just do really fun sounds, but try to make them a little bit abstract because you really want your students to really tune in to the intonation in your voice and give them a bit of a challenge when you're doing that. Next is breaking words into syllables. Apple, how many is that? Apple. Computer, computer. Next, you would begin teaching your students beginning sound isolation. What's the beginning sound of B? B. Then you'd move into ending sounds. What's the ending sound of tree? E. Then middle sounds. What's the middle sound of cat? A. It's really important that you do beginning sound, ending sound, and then middle sound. Middle sound isolation is the hardest of the 3 to master, and it is way easier for students to master if beginning and ending have been practiced a lot. Then you move into the substitution, deletion, and all of the more complex phonemic awareness. Now, if you move down this timeline, you'll see that rhyming, the teaching of rhyming, identifying, producing, and generating rhymes is kind of an ongoing process, and it follows along as you're teaching these other phonological skills. And then you move into, also, if you move down a line and over, kind of during the same time as you're doing syllables and beginning sound isolation, you begin to break words apart into onset rhymes. So what is this word? Scare, crow, scarecrow. So you start with compound words and then you move into squirrel. What's that word? Squirrel. And then if you move down the column, then blending sounds into words. What is this word? Cat, cat. And then segmenting words into sounds. What is the sounds of cat? And the student will say cat. Then also at the same time are the phonics skills. You will begin teaching alphabet, letter and name recognition and sounds and fluency. And as you move down this chart, you'll move along and teach all of the phonics skills that are labeled here. And at the same time, you're working on your students' graphophonemic knowledge or the written word, taking what they're learning and writing. And you can see that all of this works together. Even though it sequentially moves along, you look down the column and make sure that you're introducing all of the skills on the far left of the chart and then move along sequentially. Now, knowledge is power. If you know the timeline of reading and the correct way to teach all of the strands that need to be put together or all of the boards that you need to frame your home, then you will be able to help children that have problems. Now, if you look at the bottom red arrow, it says decoding CVC words. And lots of students, and if you've taught kindergarten for any length of time, you know this problem. A student, you'll say, you'll hand them the word cat. They'll touch the letters and say the sound, k, a, t, horse. How many times have you had students do that? It's mind-boggling because they just touched and said cat. Why can't they just say cat? Well, it's because something has been missed. There's a board not in your structure of your home or a strand that has not been woven into the rope. So you need to move up and look at the green and yellow and red arrows and see if students have been able to master all of those components of the reading process. So the building cannot be rushed. You get really anxious to get your home finished. I was just getting tired. It takes a long time, and you cannot rush it. There has to be a blueprint and a plan, and it has to be followed, and everything has to take its time. And layer upon layer, the home is built and completed. And it's frustrating because you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. Well, that makes me think about reading cannot be rushed. Practice makes perfect. Scientists have determined that it takes up to 400 repetitions to make a new synapses in the brain. If the repetition involves play, that number can be as few as 20. So that from that alone, we know that we need to make most of our reading instruction play-based activities. And as we use those play-based activities, we need to follow the rule of 25. So the rule of 25 is with typical students in your classroom, if you practice a skill 25 times, they will generally master that skill. Some students that have been language deprived, or they come in with limited vocabulary or other situations, they might need more time. And the rule of 25 is those students might take 25 times 25 times to actually learn that concept. Some students need 25 times 25 times 25. Those are our students that are on IEPs or second language learners. It's not that they can't learn the concept, they just need more practice because of other factors that have been in their life or the cognition or how their brain is wired. So we need to not give up and we need to not rush them. A lot of times when students aren't getting it, you want to just move on to the next point, and you should move on to the next point slightly, but you always have to remember that they haven't mastered that other component, and you need to keep practicing it and practicing it. Delivering instruction is really important. As we just heard, you can cut it from 400 times to 20 if students are learning through play. This is a picture of a student playing one of my students' favorite games, and what it is I just have a cookie sheet and some cookies that I've made out of graphics and paper, and we bake them in the ovens. Then I have a 1-minute timer and ask the students to be Mrs. Claus or Mrs. Claus helper and get the cookies out of the oven. And so I set the timer and they pick up a cookie at a time, name it, and move it to the plate. They love this game and it's just so fun and competitive. Now, this is at Christmas when they're playing this game, and so probably they've played 80 alphabet games prior to this game. And because it's a different format with a different twist, with a thematic connection, the students are just as excited to play this game. And one thing that I found is students of all ages like to play games to learn and practice reading skills. My 5th grade students are just as excited to play a game and practice a skill as the kindergarten students. So make sure that those students that have not mastered and are in that 25 times 25 or 25 times 25 or 25 group, that you just mix it up and give them a lot of opportunities. Here are a couple other examples. The one on the left is the game Pirate Pop that you might probably see at Walmart. I found it on Amazon. It's called Pirate Pop. And when you play the game, you just go around the circle and put in a sword with your students. And I was thinking, as I was playing this with my grandchildren one day, I thought, this game would be a lot more fun, first off, if you had to do something to earn putting the sword in. And so I printed some sheets just off the internet of probes, letter naming probes, and then they draw one of the strips and name the letters as quickly as they can, which is building alphabet fluency. And then after they read the strip, then they can put the sword in. And the sword that makes the pirate pop, you can play it that they're the winner or the loser. I let my kids choose each group, let them choose which one. The other game on the right is a simple fly swatter game. I just got some little fly swatters and have some CVC word cards. I call the word, and the first one that swats the word gets to collect the card. Here are a couple other games that my students are playing. The one on the left is an onset game. It's just a squirrel. He's just collecting acorns. In the bag are just pictures of acorns. That's all it is. And I say the word. What is this word? Grandma. And when they say grandma, they grab an acorn. But there's always, in my games, I like to have something to give it a little twist. In this sack, there's also cards of raccoons. And if you get a raccoon, your squirrel loses all of its acorns and has to begin again. This one on the right is a version of Frogger that students love. This one where they're racing the three frogs across the road, and to do it they have to read some CVC words. And here are some examples of some other games. I love to have parent volunteers back when, looking for brighter days when parents can again return to our classroom. Make sure that you use them and include them. They love playing these games with the students, and students love, love, love when their parents are able to come into the classroom and play the game. It makes them really proud to do so. So just as reading skills are practiced and sequentially and delivered, the reader begins to fully develop. Students need to practice early reading skills using decodable books and sight word readers. Students need to know that they put their words into practice. What are we practicing all these skills for? Well, the reason we're practicing all these skills is so that we can read. I like to begin my guided reading lessons by having students really learn what pointing is. I know that I've seen a lot of guided reading books that have dots. Try to stay away from those because we're teaching our kids how to read words, not how to read dots. They're of no benefit for students to read a book with dots under the word. And rather, teach them how to point authentically, how to know to point at an individual object as it's named. Really, this is really a complex skill. Some students really struggle. This little guy just really couldn't get it, that he had to touch the object and keep his finger there while the whole word is being said. So I found a little spider ring, put it on his finger, and told him the spider couldn't leave until his voice was done saying the word. So he pointed left to right, pig, zipper, Jeep, as his finger moves along. Now, if you give your students experiences with this point and read objects, they're going to be ready to point and read those words when you grab the books in a couple days. Next, we move to picture cards. And this child will point and read soccer, paint, ballerina. Or I mix the picture cards and the objects so that they have to point and read. Now, for my struggling students, I usually have 2 to 3 objects or picture cards. For the kids that get it quickly, I let them add and have up to 5 words or pictures that they can point and read. And those students, I let them choose out of a box and make their own sentence, if you will, that they're going to point and read. In the Wonders program that I was using in kindergarten, we had I and can are taught right at the beginning during Smart Start. And so my students have 2 sight words. And once your students have a sight word bank, it gives them so much power. And that's why I love to call our sight words power words, because that's what sight word knowledge is all about, is giving power. So because my students already have 2 sight words, I am able to move from pictures to a full sentence of words. So I have my word cards, I and can, and then add one of the picture cards or objects. I let the student generally choose, and here she's going to point and read, I can paint. Now, after a day or two of these activities, some groups need more, some groups need less, then I'll move to reading the book. This is a book that is from our Wonders Decodable Reading Set that I love to do after I've just done those activities because it follows the same pattern of touching the words. And this is also a video that I will put in my blog post of her touching and reading the story. Can I swim? Can I skate? And then the next page is flipped. I can jump. And students are so excited the day we get out this first book because we've practiced reading objects, we've practiced reading a string of picture cards, and now they're actually reading a book. And I found that doing these paper books that become the students' own book, they love them even more. And there's so many things you can do with it. So after you've read the book, you can give them a highlighter. I like to teach them to be reading detectives and ask them to circle, maybe the word can is the word we'll circle today. And so then they can take, after we've worked with this book for a day or two, then they can take this book home and read it with their families and add it to a book box. I ask at the beginning of the year that my parents gather some kind of box that students can put their collection of guided readers in so they can practice and practice. Here are a couple students that are reading some of our decodable sight word books. And again, they're videos. I will make them available on our blog so that you'll be able to see these kids reading these books. On the right, in the pink, is Areli. And she came into kindergarten not knowing a word of English. And by Christmas, she could fluently read this book and point easily at the words because she'd practiced pointing at other things before the words. And so, like I said, dots just are, they're in the way. They're in the way of what our children really can do. The picture on the left is a girl using a monster finger pointer. I like to occasionally get exciting things for kids to use as pointers or maybe even just a sticker on their pointer finger. I found that that kind of makes exciting reading. The joy of reading is found through comprehension and fluency. Just as a house would be worthless without a roof, reading is worthless without comprehension. And it's important that we make sure that our students know the purpose of reading and that we follow through, that it's just not reading a word, that it's reading a story. Some of the comprehension strategies that we can do is metacognition. It's just really amazing that students really don't know how to make pictures of in their head of a story because in today's world there's so much video that you don't really have to imagine what something's looking like. It's only when kids are read aloud to and have to form those pictures in their head that they understand the process of metacognition. So it's really important that you do a lot of activities that help them make those pictures. One thing is the bingo song and taking that letter and putting it in their head when you take the letter out is a great activity. You can do it with so many things. There's lots of holiday themed bingo songs and so forth that you can do. Another thing is just saying a sentence and having them tell you what their dog looked like. I see a dog. Oh, Johnny, what does your dog look like in your head? Another comprehension strategy for young readers is predicting and recognizing text structure and understanding that you can figure some things out. Like if I know the word cat and the C is gone and a B is there, then I could probably figure out that that word says bat. So along the way of teaching, the teaching continuum, we need to give our students these strategies how to predict and how to recognize patterns in text. Another thing is asking and answering questions. And this is really an important core standard that key details from text needs to be taught, how to pull those key details and how to take a close look at them. And so that's another activity that you need to teach students, is how to ask and answer those questions. Another one is summarizing, evaluating, and retelling. I love to do a lot of great retelling activities with my students, and this is really important. What I've noticed with reading intervention students, students that are struggling, they really have a hard time with the retelling because they really haven't learned that simple path of retelling of the characters, the setting, the problem, the challenge, how it was resolved. Just simple tips that we take for granted. Children really need to be taught so that they know how to properly retell a story. Connecting to text is another important thing. Like, why is that important? Why is it important that the little red hen wouldn't share his bread at the end of the story? Is there a time that someone hasn't shared with you? Is there a time that you were lazy and you didn't help out? Well, those kind of connections give purpose to reading and make children more connected with the story that they're reading. Another one that I love to do is readers theater. And here is a video that I can't play, I'm sorry. And it's students that are reading for purpose their story. This group is doing the Billy Goat Gruff. We've practiced this over and over again, probably for a full week. We practiced this story, reading the words and saying the words correctly and knowing all of the words in the story. And the reason that we did this was to practice reading skills, right? But for them, the purpose was so they could perform with their peers. And so that's why it is so important that we do a lot of readers theater with our kids. I love these folk story packs. My students just beg to do them. And in fact, after we've done them, then I put them in a center so that they can gather a group of students and do the books on their own. So just as landscaping is kind of the finishing touch in your home, without it, the home loses its appeal. You don't want just to have a pile of dirt in front of your yard. Well, reading independently is kind of that same closure. It's important that we give our students opportunity to read books that are on their level, that are both decodable and sight word strong. And what I do is I take a baggie and put a student's name on it and put 5 books in their bag that are on their level. And I generally go down a level for these independent books. So if a student is reading on a C level, their baggie will be B. But after they've read those 5 books, they have the opportunity to come to me, because during reader workshop, I'm available at the guided reading table to work with students or have students come to me if they need help. And they have the opportunity to come if they feel like they can pass off a book and get a new book for their bag. So they'll come over and choose which book they want to pass off, read it to me, and if I find that they read it very easily, then I will bump them up a new level. But if I bump them up a level and I think they might need support, then we will read that book together before it's placed in the bag. I have a lot of times where students are just reading to self, as shown here, or where they read with each other. Or a lot of times we took our baggies of books and went to our buddy classroom. It was a great experience for these little kids to have a chance to read. Here's a picture of some students that discovered they had the same book in their bag, and they went over and did a choral read together. It was really a great opportunity for them. So the finished home is strong and sturdy and ready, just as a home that has been built with a plan is ready to stand for its future ahead. A young reader that has been taught with due diligence and a targeted path is ready for the rigors ahead in their life ahead. We can help change the future for our students with strategic, targeted, focused teaching. Not only will scores improve, More importantly, lives will change and the future of our students will be limitless. I have seen time and time again when my hard work paid off for those students, and I have seen their path changed for the better because they leave the classroom with all of the tools in their belt to be successful in the grades that lay ahead. So once you learn to read, you'll be forever free, said Frederick Douglass, and that's the truth, and that's the gift that we want to give our students. So I want to thank ESGI for this opportunity to talk with you all. If you have any questions, I'm always available by email. It's kindergartenkiosk@gmail.com, and you can visit my blog and find a lot of answers to questions you may have and a lot of examples of things that myself and my daughter Lindsay use in our classrooms. And if you haven't listened to Lindsay and I's podcast, be sure to check it out on iTunes. It's Kindergarten Kiosk. And it is a lot of mother-daughter chat with a lot of education intertwined. But thank you, everyone. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope that you're able to enjoy the conference and get a lot of great ideas you can put right to work in your classroom. Goodbye, everyone.